Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join for today's webinar on how AI and drone technology are disrupting the mineral exploration industry. Before I get started on things, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Cody. I'll be your host today. And joining me will be Simran Kamboj, the president and CTO of Windfall Geotek. Before we get into things, I'm just going to explain a little bit about what Candrone does in the mining industry. So our main service offering is a potassium magnetometer. We use it for aerial survey, and we can also acquire high-precision aerial LiDAR and photogrammetry for topography. We're also capable of doing underground scans for areas like your stopes and shafts, as well as just other areas that are unsafe to send people into. We partner with Windfall as their data acquisition experts, and we've been working with them ongoing for quite a while now, and it looks like things are only going to keep picking up. So with that, I'm going to hand things off to Simran, and he can explain things a little bit about what their platform does.
Thanks for having me, Cody. And as Cody said, I'm the president and CTO, and we've been working with Dragonfly quite a bit recently, and we're really happy with the outcome. And one of the things that matters to us as an AI company is definitely the result and the output and the quality of the data. As everyone knows, good quality in, good quality out, or garbage in, garbage out. So when we get good data quality, we get good results. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm hopeful that something like this will sort of peel the onion on what is AI and how it's used. I think often in traditional industries like mining, it can be seen as this sort of magic thing, and I'm hoping I can do that. And hopefully Cody and I can keep it a little informal. We can have a conversation around it and make sure that people get what they would want out of this.
Yeah, and I would invite people too to ask questions throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer them on the fly. And we'll also take a quick question and answer period towards the end there.
Before we get started, I just wanted to make sure everyone can see my screen. Cody, can you see my screen and my presentation?
Yep, you're coming through good.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So just a little bit of what we're going to go through. Who is our management team? Kind of the problem that we're looking at. How our technology works. Won't be able to give you all the secrets, but I can give you a little bit. And sort of what I guess everyone would want to know about, what is the proof in the pudding, right? At the end of the day, if you don't have any success, it's really hard to value what the company does. So sorry, I had to rejig this a little bit. It's me here and Dinesh, Nathan, and Kovier. This is sort of the board, and Dinesh is a serial entrepreneur. I've worked with him for several years. We have tons of experience in technology, and most recently, I spent quite a bit of time in implementing AI into traditional industries in banking, finance, energy, insurance, healthcare, in consulting and management consulting. And Nathan is actually sort of the on-field geologist. He spent quite a bit of time looking at several projects. He's had multiple successes, and he was also the personal geo for Eric Sprott. So he spent quite a bit of time with Sprott looking at various projects across the world. And then we have Kovier, who's worked at Barrick and has been an innovation consultant since leaving Barrick for traditional mining companies like this to apply new technology and how new technology can look in a traditional environment. And of course, we have a small advisory board. It's just Colonel Stephen Appleton. He's the head of Fortescue Canada, and Fortescue is the fourth largest iron ore producer in the world. He's also a former military personnel, so he has tons of experience, and we love to utilize him and Nathan and Kovier's experience in what the in-field implementation of technology looks like, especially for something like this, for AI, because it can have a lot of downstream implications. So I'll jump right into the problem, or at least what we think or how we frame the problem, right? And the biggest one, and anyone watching, if you're from the junior markets, you understand the time to window in exploration mining is quite long. It's a very, very tough process, and the cost is very high because you're making an assumption. Okay, I'm going to go drill here, and hopefully I find some sort of deposit. And that process can be incredibly expensive. We know a drill program, a small drill program, can be up to $1 million, maybe two, depending on what you're really after. And then what we notice is the methods today that are being applied have somewhat low efficiency, and for good reason, I think. And we'll get into that a little bit later. And what we find is some of the traditional methods are not mindful of environmental, social good. They're not looking at the governance and and the social impact of some of the things that they do, because we're so busy looking for ore because we see how it's so important to the future of humanity. But I think with our technology, we can probably help with that as well. And so some of the sort of challenges we see is prioritization is very tough here. And some of the obvious stuff that every geologist would pick up based on what they understand is generally always taken. And so the last point only applies to, I would say, smaller companies. Uh, as we know, majority of the companies doing exploration are junior mining companies with low capital, and they have to do dilutive financings over and over again until they are able to have a success. And if they don't, they just have to kind of raise more money because that's the name of the game, right? And it's also the most least efficient process of the whole mining life cycle, and it's one of those processes that is undeterministic. Whereas building a mine is incredibly difficult, takes a lot of capital, but for the most part, we understand the components that go into it. And for exploration, we understand the components that go into it, but we don't know what the success is going to be. So it's always not deterministic, and that makes it a really little difficult, I'd say. And one of the things is we have noticed, and of course this is S&P data from 2021, nothing that we made up, but what we noticed is discoveries on an overall are on a downtrend. And let me get my little marker here so we can makes it a little bit easier. We can see the cost of exploration is going up. However, discoveries have been going down, like this way. And this applies to, this is gold, but this applies to copper, it goes to zinc, it goes to nickel. So really, when you look at this data from 1990, you ask yourself, well, what could be the issue? One of them is, oh, there's lag in data because mines take a long time to find. But the other is, it's clear today's methods are starting to become inefficient. And we think some of the reasons are there's too much data now. I remember back in talking to geologists working in the 80s, they didn't have that much data. It was a few foundational basic things, and now I think we got to a point where there's too much, and now we don't know where to go. It's it's separating the signal and the noise, and I truly think that's really where AI adds value for everyone. And just for everyone wondering, hey, look, that doesn't mean anything. What about, there's a few other factors at play, like drilling. What about drilling? And we noticed drilling is also the same. It's been going up traditionally. I wasn't able to pull data from the 80s, but as a general trend, it's been going up over time. So really, we think there's a bunch of factors, some of them being, all the technologies that are being used are kind of coming to this plateau. We need something else to kind of push the edge, right? And I believe that's precisely where AI comes in. And hopefully we can kind of go over that next in the technology section. Let's see. So in a summarized way, I would say this is our process. And what you'll see here is the various layers of data. And anyone who's spent some time in geology or in mineral exploration would understand, look, these are all the layers that they go do today. These are not layers that we have sort of invented that are new layers of data that are not being used. Our goal is to stick to the foundations of exploration geology and bring in all the layers of data that they already currently use. We find it'd be really difficult to sort of bring a new technology, new layer of data that is not well accepted in the industry. So everything that we use is incredibly well accepted in the whole industry. We look at the various mineral occurrences on a map. We layer that with the geophysics, the geochemistry, the topography of the data. In some cases, we also bring in the satellite imagery. All of these layers, we believe, add a component to our algorithm that gives it this ability to see something that a human necessarily can't. And if I'm to really look at this, I don't think that this is the peeling the onion part, right? This is not magic in my view. It's you have to make sure good data goes in, enough of the good data goes in, and then only will you get good outcomes on the other end. And this is the data that, like I said, the geologist team would already be using, your exploration geology team. So our goal is to sort of do the part that we think is the hardest for humans to do, which is crunching millions and millions and millions of layers of data, and leave the judgment to the geology team. So judgment comes into the input, which is what kind of data is going in. And that's also where Candrone comes in, because what we have noticed in our practice is drone data tends to be better quality because if it's flying lower to the ground, right? And Cody, I'm sure you've seen that. I don't know of your experiences, right? When you compare the data, it's like a big difference.
Yeah, we've all seen the publicly available data, and while it's great to have it to use, it's not always the best resolution. And yeah, we can definitely improve upon that using UAV surveys, so we can get things a lot closer to the ground and improve on that resolution. And like you said, Simran, where previously having all that extra information might have been overwhelming before for just a human who was interpreting it. Now, as long as we have all that data and it's good quality, we can feed as much as we want into the platform, and it'll actually increase our probabilities for targets.
Yeah, exactly. There are some nuances and differences, but I think that's where the judgment of the human comes in, as the geologist says, look, I know this area and I know the, radiometry is not going to give you much, so let's not put that in, kind of thing, right? And that judgment still goes in. And then on the other side, you see our process of, we do a lot of steps here. There's compression, interpretation. I won't go through all of them, but really the part that matters to me the most is the unbiased nature of the process. We don't meddle with the algorithm in the middle. We don't have anything that says, oh, no, you must do something like this because it's built in a philosophy that a geologist may have interpreted and put into our algorithm. We do not do that because we feel that adds that bias, right? We feel like bias is important in certain places, the input and the output, based on experience. But when it comes to number crunching, we don't want to do that. And I think that's also what's unique about our process is you can bring us to the table and you're going to be rest assured that we're not going to have a bias, because every human will have a bias. Be it, if I've made a discovery in a certain geological context, I'm going to say, oh yeah, I know I've done this before. I think it should be like this. And I think that's one of the things we can avoid. We can give you this unfeathered, unbiased opinion of the land package based purely on all of the data. And then you can make your judgments. And the other thing that we do that I think is really, really important is we have uh, two geologists on staff, and they work independently when it comes to assessing the results. They don't talk to each other. They only talk to each other once they've assessed the results and have an assessment to share. And what that does is allows us to have another two human opinions on top, because frankly, the AI is not always right. Like, it's not like, oh, it's 99% right or something. There are instances where it's like, oh, this isn't the water, whether it's legitimate or not. Maybe the water is too deep, and we know companies, and then this company may not have the capital to say, okay, we're going to do underwater drilling, right? So things like that we point out, and maybe there are some anomalies that happen. And everyone who knows that uses this data traditionally, what they do is they say, okay, look, this is a mag, there's mag low, mag high, there's EM, there's various layers of data, and each one of them give you anomalies. And then what you have to do is try to figure out which ones you want to chase, which ones you don't, and that's where bias comes in. What we do is we combine all the layers, right? And honestly, one of the times I was looking at our data, and it's like 21 million data points, and I can't process that myself. I can look at it, but really, am I going to be able to make cross relations with 7 layers of data for 21 million data points? It becomes difficult, and I think that's exactly where AI comes in. And you'll see at the output, it looks like magic. And when I explain it, peeling the onion, it's easy. And but when you look at the output, you're like, well, this had some merit, and there's a lot of value to this. And I'm gonna skip the next few slides because, but one of the things I do want to hit on is, we've been in this industry for 18 plus years. I would say we are the pioneer. I remember hearing stories from people that were in the team originally, and we still have some of those people around. Is they would go into a room and get laughed out because AI and machine learning was such a weird concept 18 years ago, especially in the mining industry. I mean, even in the computer science industry, it was not a thing that was taken seriously until I would say like a decade ago. And then you can imagine the mining industry. But what that's led us to do is, because the mining cycle is about 15 years, it led us to have discoveries, proof points, and failures, frankly. And we learned all of that, improved the algorithm over time. And one of the things I always tell everyone is, well, you can have the best algorithm, but at the end of the day, do you have outputs and real outputs to show as work? And if you don't have that, then it's hard to compare, hey, which one is good, which one's bad, which algorithms could be better than before. And I think that's a point that really makes sense. And everyone who's spent time in exploration geology understands, like, hey, look, you're not going to get a result in 3 years. If you make a discovery in 3 years, oh my God, that's usually luck. It's a very thorough process that takes time. And in order for us to be able to prove if our technology works, we had to be there step by step. Otherwise, we wouldn't know. And I think that's one of the things that we have an edge on, and the advantage in the market is because we have done this and we kind of pioneered the field. We have led this revolution, and I'm really grateful that there's other people doing it now as well, because it's helping validate what we're doing. And so one of the things here is, you saw Nathan earlier on our board, and this is the quote by Nathan. I won't read it out to you, but you may say, hey, look, this guy's on the board. Why does this quote matter? He's obviously going to boost about the company. But really, the reason I added this and left it in here is because Nathan didn't join us because he's like, oh, that's a cool idea, I should join. He joined us because his team used our technology, found success, and he used it again, found success, and he said, okay, this is kind of crazy. I don't know what you guys are doing, but there's something here. It's not magic, obviously, because there's false positive, but what's happening is it's helping me eliminate the time it takes for me to go from the beginning of an exploration project to sort of where I need to be, and helps me prioritize certain things, because he himself noticed his team was having a tough time saying, I don't know which targets to prioritize. There's like 50 of them, right? And I think, so that's why I think it's important to have his input here, and especially in this case where Nathan has spent a lot of time there looking at a lot of deposits around the world. And then he spent a lot of time having individual success after and before that, that led him to sort of get to this point of saying, okay, I understand what it takes to have success, and I see what the future of mining exploration can be. And I think that's really where we feel like it's important to have. And for us, it's a symbiotic relationship, right? We get to learn on his projects. Like every time he's working, because he's still in the field, we say, okay, try this, try this, try this. I mean, we try so many things. We have the proven methods, and then we have these tests that we do. And it's, we're lucky because you don't always get to do that with a lot of partners.
Sure. Yeah, and even just
So,
touching back onto the previous things, you and I were recently talking too about the failures and how that's really a loose term in this application, because a failure just means that you've successfully identified a new way to teach the platform, right? So even failures have their benefit in this exploration phase.
oh yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's it's somewhat hard to explain that maybe to folks that don't come from a data background. Is for us, for a model, when you're trying to model some sort of thing, having the yeses and the nos, or the ones and the zeros, or the failures and the wins are equally as important. Because what a failure does is it allows the model to understand what I don't need to model and what I do need to model. And more failures, unfortunately, is helpful. So obviously, this is someone watching saying, okay, well, I don't want to fail. My goal is to succeed. Well, I think that's 100% fair. But one of the things that we're able to do is we're able to look at all your historical data. Even if it's not yours, it's somewhere out in the field. And we've noticed most mining jurisdictions and countries that are really pro mining, like Canada, Australia, they're very open with their data. In fact, the government forces everyone to put their data up, failure or success. And I think that's incredibly important, because it makes the life of the folks coming in the future much easier. And you'll see examples where it's like played such a key role. And sometimes I wonder, if that hadn't happened and that data wasn't shared, would we be able to have that success? Because for AI, like you said, Cody, earlier, or we were talking about, you need more data. And not always more data, but there's a baseline of something that you need, and you just can't circumvent that. And that's also the limitation of the system, unfortunately. Like if you're going to complete greenfields, if there's zero data whatsoever, it's going to be challenging for us as well as it is for the geologists. So, and that's one of the things that I like to emphasize for geologists, because I remember, when AI started getting popular in this industry about 4 or 5 years ago, one of the biggest sort of hurdles was, hey, is this going to replace my job? And I was like, not even close. Like what the job that the geologists and exploration geologists do is so key to what we do, is that it's again a symbiotic relationship. We cannot exist without them, because there's a groundwork of, like, if there's nothing ever been done, I'm sorry, AI will never help, right? But if the geologist goes in the field, collects the rock samples, collects the soil samples, looks at some of the foundational geophysics, and maybe does a drill or two just to test a theory, that's when we're able to come in. And by the way, I don't mean we need like thousands and thousands of data points in the beginning. We just need something to go by. And what we like to do is build a relationship with clients where we sort of renew the project, redo the job every time there's new data. And what I'm finding is a significant benefit to having teams that are willing to work with us on a multi-year basis, purely because every season you collect more data, whether it's bad or good, it's still data that helps towards a discovery. And in some cases, one of the things we can do is eliminate where you would go because there's such large land masses sometimes that you're targeting. And in other cases, we can narrow down. It's like, okay, you know what? In order for you to be successful based on just the data we have, highest probability area looks like this one area here. Why don't we just go there first? And if you have a small success, that's okay, because what that small success does is allows you to gain confidence from the investors, and you can raise more money without having losing investor confidence, because they know what's coming. They know that, okay, there's something, and what you might be doing is chasing a vein when it comes to gold, or maybe you're just at the tip of where the ore is and you just find out the right direction to go. And all of that, I think, is that advantage that we add, right? And the other thing I guess I should mention is, I talked about junior companies, but I would say we have primarily three use cases, right? One of them being junior companies are getting to start. But there's this companies that have already have established mines, and they're like, look, we need extensions, because at that point you've invested a lot of capital in a mine, you built the infrastructure, and if you're near end of life, you're like, what do I do? There's so much capital I put in this. And I think that's where we can help, and we've done that recently um, with a pretty large operating mine, where we help them say, look, check this out. It's an extension to your zone. And it's not that they're not smart enough to know it. It's just sometimes when you're building a mine, there's a process so long, exploration takes a bit of a backseat once you have an operating mine, because now you're looking to just have efficiency and build a mine to get the best output and the financial output that you're looking for. But what we're able to do is go in with a fresh set of eyes and say, look, these are the areas that you're worth looking. Or guess what? Maybe it's not right where your claims are, but maybe it's 5, 6, 7 kilometers away. So you're still able to use your facility and the operations that you spent the past 20 years building. And I think that's one of the key things for us, is helping do that as well, and not just in junior side. Unfortunately, some of the examples I'm showing you in next will have to be junior, because what we notice is larger companies, there's so much going on, and a lot of the times they don't have to and don't like to make everything public for strategic reasons and so on. Like, we work with Codelco, which is the largest copper producer in the world, and several times, and they unfortunately will not share what goes there, what happened with the outcome, because they don't feel the need to, because they might be doing exploration that's not going to come to fruition for another 10, 15 years, right? So, Cody, I wanted to jump into discoveries. I know I've been talking a lot, so I wanted to give you the chance if you have any questions, or if I should be highlighting something else, because I don't
No,
want
I,
to just
I
keep.
think we're on a good pace, and that was a good background. I know you and I had previously talked about, and I was kind of surprised originally because I thought the number was a little bit lower. We had talked about failed exploration phases, and I was under the impression it was about 1 in 500, but you had clued me into it's more along the lines of 1 in 5,000 are actually successful. So finding these different ways to increase efficiency and your odds of an actual successful exploration going forward is going to be the most important thing for a lot of companies, especially at the junior grade.
I 100% agree with you. And yeah, like, 1 in 5,000 is what I've been told the number is, and most people agree. And this is in greenfields, and I believe it's 1 in a few thousand when it comes to brownfield, which is close to a mine or in a mining district. So one of the things I guess I wanted to let the audience know is, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, because Cody and I will certainly leave some time for questions. That hopefully will allow everyone to sort of get into what they need to. And I know this is a bit of a dense and deep topic to go into, cover in 45 minutes, so I'm happy to answer questions for other folks, whether it's outside of this webinar or not, or Cody. We're both pretty in sync at this moment when it comes to this kind of work. So I have this example and I broke it down to 3 slides because I think it really tells a good story here. It was called the Crawford project when we got it, and today it's called the Canada Nickel Company, and they trade in the market. So I believe we got this project, 2018, and the team hadn't really done too much. It said, look, this is just a historical data. It was adjacent to a decent mining camp, so we had good data already. And what you see here is the drill collars, the plus signs, and the little dots, and most of them were misses. And I think this is where that public data comes in, right? Like, hey, look, we don't want to have failure, but someone else's failure can be helpful for data, at least for the model itself. And this is kind of one of those examples where there's a few companies that tried historically to look for something here, and they weren't able to find it. So this new team says, look, we have a philosophy and a theory that we think there's something here. We're going to apply what we think traditionally. And why don't you apply what you think from an artificial intelligence perspective and just give us something to work with, and we'll see if things make sense, we'll go down this road. And just for context, I believe there's only one area up here. Let me get my little pointer back. Up here, that had some minor results, but not enough to justify anything that I would call a discovery, or nothing that they can raise money and go forward with. And you see the little line in the middle is because there's a road and there's a power line there, so any of the geophysics data would be impacted. So of course we cut that out, and we have to kind of behave. And this looks small, by the way, but this is a huge landmass package. Like, this could take a company 10 years to explore if they didn't have any geophysics, no prioritization of targets. So what I'll show next is what our output looks like from that layer of data, the number crunching, and all the IP we have developed from the last 18 years is this. So what you're really looking at is a heat map here. Blue are the areas where our algorithm doesn't think there's probabilistically much to go after. Doesn't mean it's right. It just means based on the data and the input, we don't think there's much here to explore. And like a heat map, anything red is higher propensity, higher likelihood of deposit, or we don't know exactly, we can't tell you the size, unfortunately, but it gives you the area we think the algorithm thinks that you should go to. And the green areas, the algorithm thinks there's something there, but probabilistically, but lesser likelihood than the areas in red. So this is what we gave to the team. And fortunately, they had a lot of overlap and say, look, a lot of these targets make sense for us as well. And some of them are new, so that's really helpful. And one in particular is the one here. And Cody, you can see my cursor, right? They chose not to go here. And that's okay, because like I said, I think the curation and the judgment that human has is equally as valuable as the data that we're providing, the output we're providing. And next, I'll show you the drilling results, and you'll be surprised in all the areas that they were able to hit. So yellow was the higher grade stuff, and red was the lower grade stuff. And you can see how well that aligns up, right? And of course, we're a little off here, but I'm sure if they drilled here, found something, right? But again, they're not just drilling the targets we give them. They're drilling the targets layered onto their hypothesis of where the ore is and how it's spread. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. And I think really they're responsible for the discovery, and all we were able to do is give them a little assist. I was talking to Cody yesterday. I was like, what is the right way to say this? Like, hey, what about a little assist? I'm like, that's perfect. I think that's just how we categorize it. We give them a little assist, and hopefully it's in the right direction, and it helps them lead them to a discovery. And I guess one of the important parts here that I want to relay to everyone, this is where I find like this looks like magic, right? But one of the things I want to really relay back again is it's the data. The input data, if it's good, the output will be good. And our limitations are also the data. So some people say, hey, look, our deposit might be a kilometer down. I'm just making a number up. It's like, okay, well, is your data that captures the geophysics in the area also penetrating a kilometer? If not, then unfortunately the output that we have also can't do that, right? Because we're only using the data you're providing us. So in some cases that's unfortunate, but I would say by and large, most of the time, I would say more than 85, 90% of the time, we're able to help, because most of the data these days is penetrating deep enough. Like a traditional mag goes up to 200 meters relatively easily. VTEMs are going 500, 600, 700 meters now. So while, when you look at this heat map, it looks a little like, oh, wow, that's a little ridiculous. That's crazy. How'd you find that? I do want to remind you guys, it's the data, right? The data is sort of the king here. The second thing is also, I'm going to show you a really good example because I think it works, but we've had our fair share of failures, and this is one of the larger ones. So I believe this is one of the larger low-grade nickel discoveries in Canada since the 1970s. So it's a really, really good sort of project and good example. But in our way, like we also deem just hitting gold, let's say, a success as well. So just because it's not a deposit that's economical, unfortunately for us, we still think that's success, but it's not an economic success, but it's success from the perspective of the algorithm saying, look, we are able to find it. How much we found, and is that something that we could build a mine on, is unfortunately something we can't help with. But I think by and large, getting to that first spot is the hardest part. Beyond then, it's, I think, a little bit easier because now you have a little bit more confidence, you have a little bit more capital, and you have something to go on.
Yeah, and Simran, you kind of reminded me too, talking about how sensors are improving in the market as well. It's going to give us the ability to even extend the lifetime of some of these sites as well, right? Once we're able to get further penetration into the earth, we're only going to be able to take more stuff out of the ground after that, which means better return on investment for a lot of investors, and making sure that these sites stay open longer.
Yeah, exactly. And the advantage there, and I truly say, I mean, we're doing this with a drone company, but the reality is the drones, they naturally fly so much slower to the ground. They're giving you more bang for your buck because you're able to now use that to go deeper, right? And that genuinely gives us a better quality data set to work with. And one of the other things I guess I didn't touch upon is, of course, our goal is to help you make a discovery and your team find success. But what I see, because if you look at the life cycle, mining life cycle, I think someone did a really great diagram. And you look at the success and the failure rate, and you look at where sort of the bottleneck is, it's always exploration, right? It's because exploration is the riskiest. It takes the most amount of time. It's the most uncertain. So my view is, look, if we're going to transition from this fossil fuel world to a carbon-free neutral world, we need more mining. There's, as much as people would like to say, there's not many solutions. The recycling ore could only be, but account for maybe 5%, numbers I've seen. For the most part, we need new minerals found in the ground, and we need exploration to become more successful, and we need otherwise, if you look at the pipeline, you're like, look, this is starting to become tricky because if North America is going to switch to all electric vehicles and solar panels and all of these things, you can't have that without mining. And you can't have that without having a higher success rate exploration program. Because with that, your pipeline starts to dry out and all you got is what you have left. And I don't think that's feasible. So I feel like this is one of the most critical components. Unfortunately, it plays out in the next 30, 40 years and on the next 30, 40 weeks. And I think if it was 30, 40 weeks, everyone would be jumping on it, right? But I think the next 30, 40 years, so what does that require? I think in my view, that requires a really deep investment into exploration with the right tool set so you can have more discoveries, not just because we all want to make money, but I think it's truly because as for humanity to move forward, we would want this to happen. A renewable energy future is not possible without good mining practices, good exploration programs. So I have another example, and I know we're close to running out of time, so I wanted to go through this example because I think it's quite neat, and it hits on the other use case that we have, which is, okay, what if you have an operating mine? Then can I still use your technology? And this is exactly it. It's a bit complicated. I couldn't break it down to 3 slides. I didn't have the time, but what I can say is I'll walk you through this, and hopefully this helps. Let me bring my little pointer tool out to tell a story. So remember that project I told you about, Cody, where we said, hey, look, Nathan joined us or whatever. So this is where he found success. He didn't know about us.
Right.
This company, Metnor Bachelor, like mine, it's a mine now, but I don't believe it was back then in 2010. It was a project he was sort of a junior geologist on, maybe, or maybe mid-tier. And then the company gets bought out, new team comes in, they look at the stuff and they're like, interesting, that's a cool little report. Like, and they had made a drill that had some good results in an area. And then he says, oh, this coincides with what the report says. Why don't we actually look into the report and figure it out? So when they were planning the drill program, they said, okay, let's let's add another layer of input. And this is 2010, right? So not everyone was convinced, but it said, look, we're going to do the program anyway. Why don't we give it a shot? So before I do that, I guess I should sort of explain what this map is showing here. So what you see in little green dots are what other drilling that had happened in the past. And what you see is another heat map. Again, area in the blue is areas that the algorithm thinks statistically there's not much there from a ore perspective. And I think the rest of it is obvious. And I think the orange dots that you see are grades on the drills that are above 0.5 grams per ton, which is pretty important because below that is really, it's hard to have a economical deposit. So remember, this is 2010. So we give them the results. They do some rock samples here in zone C. Pretty decent results, not astronomical, but pretty decent. So I think the company gets sold after that. And then A is their tailings facility. And that's where we said, look, we think you have something there. And the original team was like, I don't know, it's a tailings facility, we've checked. And every time I talk to a geologist that has gone through this process, like, it's always the tailings facility, because this is where they put everything, and it kind of gets shoved under the rug. It's in my view, tailings facilities are the gold mine, pardon the pun. And this is the area that in 2015 they drilled, and they got 10.2 grams per ton gold over 26 meters. So anyone who knows these values understands, hey, this is a pretty decent number. If you are, and these guys already have an operating mine, I believe, over here. And what does that allow? Well, that allows you to now extend the life cycle of the mine. Now in 2015, you're like, oh, there's a whole area I didn't explore. And this is, I believe, what they're doing today. Is this mine is now going into zone A, and they've gone really deep. What we found had a limitation to, I believe, 300 meters. They have now gone further deep and realized, oh, there's ore body even further down into the ground, and they're now able to use that and put it into the mill, extend the life of the mine. And and the challenge here that I look at the timelines and people don't realize, 2010 is when we gave them the project, 2015 is when they found it, 2022 is when they're actually going to be mining the ore. Like, that's the window that you need an algorithm to be successful, to determine if it's successful. But it's also, that's the window that the mining life cycle works on, and you have to kind of incorporate yourself into it. And one of the things I'd like to say is, we're not taking credit for this discovery by any means, because all we did was process the data, show you where we think highest probability targets are. And then at the end of the day, there's a lot of groundwork that goes before and after that. That has to be the geology team themselves, right? And like I said, it's an assist, right? It's just an assist, and whether you follow up or not is their sort of prerogative based on the program that they were running. The other thing that I'd like to point out is 2021 March is they went to this area B, and they found 28 meters of 1.4 grams per ton and 18.3 meters of 1.9 grams per ton gold. Again, when you have a facility, finding something like that is really good. And even if you don't have a facility, a result like this is a relatively decent open pit mine. So we feel like, when you have a deposit, we can help you in this way, right? And like I said, it's not magic. It's just data. It's probabilities, but done at millions and millions of layers that allows computer to see something that a human may not see initially, right? And that's really, really what it comes down to. So I think that's it from examples, because we're pretty close to time, and I don't want to keep going over, but I feel like sends the right message here. What I wanted to do, Cody, was I don't know if you got any questions yourself, or if there's questions that we need to address.
Yeah, one
That
thing,
I'd love to be able to.
I know it's something that you and I had also talked about previously, but just maybe we can make it more clear for other people, because we've talked about explorations in Canada a lot, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this platform's locked into Canadian geography, right? Like, we can take this other places in the world.
Definitely. It's just all about the data, right? And certain jurisdictions have better data, and certain areas just have better data because they've traditionally had supported mining anyway. So people have that, right? Morocco is good. Certain parts of Africa. We have worked in Australia, South America. We worked in India. We worked in. We had a project in China. We didn't get actually a chance to do it. Oh, sorry, not China, Japan. And of course, all over North America, we spent quite a bit of time working. And like I said, these two discoveries that I showed in examples were actually in Canada. But we worked, like I said, in Australia as well. And in South America, we worked with Codelco, which everyone knows, right? And quite a few of these. So it doesn't matter. It goes across geographies. And the good thing everyone understands is, by and large, geological context may be similar in a small setting, but by and large, it's different. But it doesn't matter, because we're not going by that. What we're going by is the data, right? we're just unbiased, going by the data, what the data tells us, and then adding the human layer of, as a filter. I think of it as like a little filter that says, okay, I know your data AI said this, but this one may not make sense, but that's okay, and that's what we want. We want to be able for you to look at your drill targets and what we provide and overlay them and say, okay, these ones make the most sense, or these ones make the least sense. Because in the beginning, when you're starting a program, a little bit of success can go a long way. It can give you that confidence to say, okay, there might be something here, or my theory, my hypothesis that I had has some merit. And I think that's exactly where we help. By the way, one of the things is interesting is, you know, we've done projects with so many companies, and to this day we have news trickling in. It's like, oh look, this project that you did in 2016 is they found something here. 2018 they found something here. The tricky part here is we can't say, oh look, we found it, because obviously we didn't. We did the work and then the team found it. But what I guess what I mean by that is, independent of geography and independent of sort of time, we're able to sort of consistently produce results. Like, you know, a 2010 result that's relevant in 2021, I think speaks volumes to the technique and the process we built over the past 18 years that is pretty solid.
Absolutely. And before Simran does a quick summary here, I do just want to invite everyone again, if you do have questions, feel free to pop them into the question box, and we will make sure to answer those before we end today.
For sure. So a little summary here, as I said to everyone, you know, we believe AI can be that cutting edge advantage for you. It can give you the edge over someone else when you look at it from a competitive landscape perspective. It can, and why us? Well, I think I showed you guys the two examples. The last mine was, I believe, basically the first mine ever that's ever come out of sort of AI work, right? Obviously we're not taking credit for the mine itself, but we're saying the work where the AI was used to make a discovery that now is being mined, right? And I think when it comes to comparing algorithms and so on, the best output you look at is, hey, has it worked in the past? That's it, right? You can have the most technically competent algorithm, but does it provide the output? And the other thing is, we genuinely feel like we have saved a lot of time and money for a lot of projects. And, you know, Canada Nickel one I showed you was a great example of that, where, you know, going from 2018 to 2021, they had a bona fide discovery. That's generally not common. It's more on the uncommon side to have happened. And the other thing, when it comes to junior markets, and you know, larger cap companies have a different story, but it allows you to add some investor confidence, because now you're using every tool at your disposal, right? It's not just about ego. It's more about, hey, let's just use whatever it takes to make a discovery, to make our investors a return. And the last one is the environmental impact. And Cody, we didn't talk about that a lot, but really the environmental impact, in my view, you know, there's 2 or 3 pillars here, right? The environmental side of it is just hopefully you're doing less drilling. And we like to think that the drilling may not make an impact, but imagine drilling 100 meters into the ground and then you do it again and again. It's like 50 to 60 drills in an area. You're definitely disturbing the ecology. You're making an impact that we may not be able to measure right away, but it's going to have an impact. And the other part of it is just on the social governance side, if we can use our tool to help the transition of energy, I think that for me, that's why it gets me out of bed, to be honest, and it's hard to see because it's like a 30, 40-year window down the road. But for me, that makes the biggest impact. And like I said, when it comes to mining life cycle, the most important component is the exploration, to make sure the pipeline is fed so that we have the materials and the minerals we need to make the transition, right? And one of the examples is like copper. Like, yeah, forget batteries, fine, that's a problem and everyone knows about it. But if you don't want to make enough solar panels, you need this. You need this equipment. You need copper. Copper is one of the most important, not just in solar panels, it's in most electronics, for sure, solar panels, right? But yeah, that's all I got. But if you guys have any questions, of course, you can reach out. This is my email.
Yeah, we
And
did have one come through here so far, and I would invite people again, if you do have questions, please feel free to send them through now, and we'll take a minute here to get them answered. Fern had a great question. The 2 examples that you showed us, Simran, for Canada Nickel Company and Metanor Bachelor, they wanted to know what that data was collected with. So it wouldn't have been Candrone working, that would have been before our partnership. But was that data collected with a drone and magnetometer?
So the Candrone, the Matnor Bachelor mine area was not, because at this 20, I don't think drones were being used in mining at that point. Maybe very minimally, but I don't really think they had
It
made
would have been
that
a
kind of
very
impact
basic
yet.
for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And the Canada nickel, no, and funny enough, we just use public data for that, and that's the surprising part. And I like to tell people, like, some people think, oh, look, they need something fancy. I'm like, no, no, no. Your starting point can be the public data. Your starting point can be low quality data, because guess what? In year 2, you're gonna chase that. You're gonna have some success, hopefully, maybe have more money, and then you can do a refresh, and that refresh, we can add that data back into the algorithm, and that impacts the results. We've seen that happen because, like you said, Cody, right? All the negatives, all the positives, any success or failure, they all contribute to building a better model, which leads to a better output when it comes to the accuracy of the model itself. So
Right.
no, unfortunately it wasn't, but actually Cody and I were working on a few that will be, so that I'm looking forward to a story, and I'm pretty confident in a decade from now we'll be looking at a mine there, hopefully. But in these cases it wasn't, but that's goes to show you like what you can do with even as a starting point, right? You don't need to make that investment right away. You can make that investment as you see that you're getting closer to a discovery, or you're getting closer to something that you think validates your hypothesis.
Right. Amazing. Well, I haven't seen any more questions come through just yet. I'm going to assume you've done a really good job informing everyone so far. If people do have more questions, they'll be able to submit them towards the end here. But for now, I want to thank you, Simran, for joining us and sharing all the information. It's a really exciting platform, and we're really excited to be partnered with you guys collecting this data and helping make this transition to a more renewable future for everybody. And yeah, everyone, if you want to get in touch with Simran and have any more questions, he did show his information there before, but you can also always reach out to us and we're happy to put you in touch.
Thanks for having me, Cody, and thanks to Candrone. And I'm really excited, honestly, when our team sees the drone data, they're always like, wow, I didn't realize this kind of data, like the quality really visually. And I'm hoping this leads to more discoveries and these new tools continue to kind of progress. I know everyone wants to make money and that's everyone's goal, but really, if you can make money while doing social good, it's like the best of both worlds. And I'm looking forward to doing that. And hopefully we can help anyone in the audience that hasn't had the chance to use the technology yet.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining, Simran.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, everyone. With that, I want to thank you for joining today. Do make sure that you reach out to us at support@candrone.com if you did have any more questions or maybe they didn't get answered today. Also, be sure to give us a follow on our social media channels and reach out to us about future webinar topics that you want to see. Thanks for coming out.